stuff together here. You think I could do that before? Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Now, we've been talking about the elderly, and today we're going to talk about mistreatment of the elderly. I had a brother-in-law who worked in another state, and he investigated mistreatment of the elderly, and unfortunately that is a thing. So let's dig into that. A middle-aged woman drives up to a hospital emergency room in a middle-sized American city. She lifts a frail, elderly woman who appears somewhat confused out of the car and into a wheelchair, wheels her into the emergency room, and quietly walks out and drives away, leaving no identification. So, that was caught on a, CCTV at a hospital. They did not get a license plate. I don't know whether she took it off or covered it or whatever, but, that was a thing. Granny dumping is one form of elder abuse, and that's what they call that when you take your elder to a hospital or somewhere and just leave them there with no ID and, hope nobody finds out who they are. Maltreatment or neglect of dependent older persons or violation of their personal rights. So, as much as sometimes you might feel like it, you just can't dump your elder onto other folks. You might have to put them in assisted living if no one else in the family or you just can't deal with them. I have friends who have a father that was really abusive. He was a drug addict and into alcohol and stuff like that. And so, he's had to move in with somebody else because nobody in the family wants to deal with him because, of course, why would they? You can be a decent person and still, love someone but not want to put yourself in a situation to be stolen from or used. So, you don't have to dump your granny. Make arrangements for them. If they have absolutely no monetary help coming in, there are Medicaid places where they can get a Medicaid bed. Just help that happen. And then if they were just a terrible, horrible person to you so that you don't want to have to deal with that, then you can just put them there and know that they're being taken care of. Now, sometimes it's the dumper that's a terrible, horrible person, so I'm not saying, all older folks fall into that category, but there are some I know that do. Mistreatment of the dependent older persons or violation of their personal rights if an elderly may fall under any of 4 categories. Number 1, physical violence intended to cause injury. And now, when I worked at a nursing home, we had a couple that was rooming together, and he started beating his wife. And evidently, it's probably happened before, but he was giving her black eyes. And so we told the kids, we cannot leave them in the same room together. We cannot allow him to do this to her. We're going to divide them up. She's going to have her room, he's going to have a room. But I want you to know, she still came down at every meal and sat there and wanted to eat with him and everything. And she was always in there talking to him and, patted him on the hand and stuff like that. But, I mean, this old man they were both in wheelchairs, but he would pop her in the eye, any little thing she said, and give her a black eye. So, that's unfortunate. And now I know my grandfather had a woman living in a house with him, and she brought 2 of her children. Eventually, one was taken away from her, so he left, the younger one. But the older one stayed, and they got into a fight with my grandfather over probably money, since we know they were taking his money, and they knocked his 2 front teeth out. So, this unfortunately happens. But it's clearly against the law. Psychological or emotional abuse. And people don't think that is abuse sometimes, but it is. And sometimes psychological abuse is worse than physical abuse. sometimes people could say things to you that you kind of wish they'd have just slapped you because it would have hurt less, you know. In emotional abuse, like I say, especially if it's family members, they might know how to push buttons, you know, and they might know where the soft spots are. So, you know, that is still abuse. You know, if you're psychologically and emotionally torturing someone, that's still abuse. Which may include insults and threats, such as the threat of abandonment or institutionalization. And now, I heard a joke like that a while back, that somebody was talking to somebody and saying, well, if you go act like that, you're going to go in a home. But you're not supposed to say that to an older person, because that can be construed as emotional abuse. Number 3, material exploitations or misappropriations of money or property. And that's what's happened with my grandfather when he had his caretaker in his home. They were taking money from him. Like the bank called my mom and said, hey, they come, he gets his check, they wait for him outside and take it right from him. We watch him do it. And then, like I said, we had left the stuff of my grandmother's in the house thinking it was going to be okay until he passed on. But then he had her come into the house, and we found out she was taking stuff and pawning stuff, and she was having a big yard sale and selling off stuff. And that was not her property to do that with. She just wanted the money from it. So, you know, like I say, my mother and my uncle and I and my husband and kids went to the house and got all of my grandmother's things out of the house so that they could no longer be sold. But there wasn't much left by the time we got there. So, and then, you know, my grandfather was covering for her. He tried to lie and say, because, you know, I was like, well, what happened? Your mother took that. And then I talked, no, she took that, you know. So it was he said, she said, and he made up stories about everything. So, you know, we knew that she was pawning stuff, selling stuff, and he was allowing her to do it because at the time he thought he was in love with her. So, and number 4, neglect. Intentional or unintentional failure to meet a dependent older person's needs. And now there was a person in my husband's family who, there was a man that lived in their neighborhood, and he had no children or anyone to help him. And this person said, well, if you give me your property and all that stuff, I'll take care of you. And so the man signed him over all his property and stuff. And then what he did was he would bring him a sandwich once a day, you know. And so he was not taking care of him. He would just bring him a sandwich. So, you know, I feel like that is the case of that, you know. You can't just dump people and do the bare minimum and assume that that's going to be okay, because a lot of times it's not going to be okay. And, you know, we know there's a lot of people in the world who are not the best people in the world. But again, you can't be doing that. Physical violence may be less common than is generally believed. That's because those are the stories that make the headlines. So those are the ones you think are probably the most common and going on, but it's usually probably the mental and emotional abuse. Financial exploitation is probably more so. That's more common. Now, that's only going to be in people who have some money to, you know, worry about exploiting. This is something that goes on in more wealthy families where there's money to be inherited. And, you know, we've all seen movies where, you know, they bump off the old person so they can get the money, and then the person left the money all to charity or the dog or something like that. But that can be real. There are folks who, that's all they care about. They don't care about their elder. They care about the money situation. And that's what they're worried about. So that is probably more common than, you know, somebody beating up on an older person. The American Medical Association has added a 5th category, violating personal rights. For example, the older person's right to privacy and to make his or her own personal and health decisions. Now, that my father has advocated for his rights on that one. There was a family member who wanted to be more involved, and he said, hey, no, this is my life. I have a right to my privacy. I have a right to do what I want to do. My father's very outspoken, so he put that line down there and said, no, as long as my brain is still kicking, which it is, I'm gonna be in charge of what's going on around here. Contrary to popular belief, most elder abuse does not occur in institutions where there are laws and regulations to prevent it. And I know when I worked at the nursing home for 2 years, there are rules and regulations for every little thing. Every little thing must be done in a certain way. So, actually, your elder is probably pretty safe there unless you get a really bad place, which, I mean, I've heard stories, and there was one woman that was not the greatest. She was treating people badly at the place I worked, but they quickly got on her. So, they're not the evil places that a lot of people make them out to be. It most often happens to frail or demented elderly people living with spouses or children. Now, having dealt with someone who has dementia, I can tell you that's rough. Because at one time, a couple years ago, when her dementia was just roaring, before they put her on medication for it, she was just being so hateful. She was saying horrible things to my husband, cussing him out, saying mean things to him, accusing him of everything. She accused my whole family of stealing from her. My poor little kids were like, we didn't do that. We didn't do. But in her mind, they did. In her mind, my husband and I were planning a wedding. So we were ordering things and having them delivered to her place because our place has a porch pirate problem. And she, in her mind, she decided these were clothes and shoes for me. So she was saying, I buy new clothes and shoes every week, and I'm putting my husband in the poorhouse. He's the poorest man in town because, I'm buying all this stuff. And in her mind, she really believed all this. And she would come at us and start cussing and yelling and stuff like that. So my husband, the other people in his family had said, hey, we'll help you if you need it. So he called his brother, and basically his brother had nothing to say. He called his aunt, who they wouldn't even answer the phone, but then his uncle calls me back later and says, you people are garbage. And I'm like, no, we're not garbage. You offered. You said if her brain was gone, you said that if it got bad, you all would help. And of course, no, they didn't want to help. So, my husband got with his sons and said, I need help. Y'all are going to have to help me out. And then, my middle son ended up getting divorced. He ended up going and living with her, so that helped out a lot. Yeah, people with dementia can be a really tough one because they're not in their right mind, and in their mind, they 100% believe what they're saying. They 100% believe this. They can even have hallucinations and see things and hear things. So that is a hard one, and I can believe that in the cases of people with dementia, it can lead to physical violence because the other person might be just trying to calm them down and shut them up, and it's a lot to have to deal with. So I can see where a spouse or a child who has not talked to a doctor about it or gone through any counseling or anything can come to the point where they're just wanting this to stop. This person is clearly crazy, but they can't help it because it's dementia. And they just want to shut them down. So, I mean, having been around somebody with dementia to the point where they were accusing everybody of everything, that none of it was really happening, I can see how you would get to that point. We never got to that point because I said, we need to get some help, and I just straight up told her, I said, you're making up stories about everybody. Nobody is doing this to you. He is here every day, God bless him, putting up with you. The children are putting up with you, you know. You're lucky to have a family that's willing to do this for you. You need to talk to your doctor and see if you can get some medication. And she realized, you know, that I was right. And so she did. She went to her doctor and she got some medication, and then all that stopped. So, you know, we could breathe again. Well, like I say, it can be hard to deal with someone who has dementia. The abuser is more likely to be a spouse, since more older people live with their spouses. So it's just a matter of statistics there. Often, abuse of an elderly wife is a continuation of abuse that went on throughout the marriage. And like I said, we had that man that was still abusing his wife in the nursing home. You know, so don't think it's going to end just because, you know, they get old. Neglect by family caregivers is usually unintentional. Many don't know how to give proper care or in poor health themselves. That's kind of the situation with my mother-in-law. My husband, he's 61 years old. He's got a bad back and bad hips, and he could not pick her up off the floor anymore. My son even said when he went to pick her up, she was too heavy for him. It kind of strained his back a little bit. So, you know, people can only do what they can do. And then when you get to the point where you can't do anymore for this person, you need to check out help. You need to see what help they can get, what help you can get, because, you know, you don't want a situation to just escalate to the point where, you know, everybody hates everybody and, you know, no one's getting help, no one's giving help, and it's a big mess. Elder abuse should be recognized as a type of domestic violence, because it is. You know, it's domestic, it's happening in the home, and, you know, it should be recognized. Most physical abuse can be resolved by counseling and other services. And I know that's true. I used to work at a psychology group and a counseling center, and I did coaching on my own. I was a psychological consultant. So I know that usually when people learn better, they do better. And, you know, like my husband, when I said we're not having a repeat of what happened last time. You had some anger issues. You're going to go to anger management if we want to get back together. You have bipolar and meds. He says the meds, everybody I know with bipolar says the meds make them feel not like themselves. So you're going to go to bipolar skills training to learn how to manage when you see this coming. And then, because there were relationship issues, we're going to go to couples counseling and get that hashed out. And we did. And, you know, we're going strong. We're happy. So, you know, when you know better, you can do better. Abusers need treatment to recognize what they are doing and assistance to reduce their stress of caregiving. Because a lot of people, they don't know what they're doing is wrong. They think this is how you deal with it. They learn these things through their family. That's why I talk about abuse being a generational curse, because it's passed down through the family. And if they learn, you know, that this is not an okay way to be, and this is not how you deal with things, there's more constructive, positive ways to deal with things, then they can put those into play and have a better outcome. So, stress can be a big deal in caregiving. It can be stressful. Like I said, when she was at home and wanted somebody there every day and was, you know, falling and calling, you know, the fire and rescue to come every, you know, 3 and 4 times a week, that was so stressful for us because we never knew, you know, what was going to happen that day. And like I said, my husband and my sons were trying to be nice because her oldest son, who has power of attorney, lives in a different state, you know, so he can't be there. So all the burden of caregiving was put on my husband and my 3 sons, which I felt was unfair. And so on a daily basis, you know, what's going to happen today? And that went on for several months until they were told by fire and rescue that they were no longer coming to her house to pick her up. She's become a nuisance complaint because they have other runs they could be making. They can't keep doing this for her. And since she had dementia and she was falling so much, she could no longer be at home by herself, or they were going to, tell EMS the same thing and, say, hey, you need to check this situation out. But like I said, sometimes when you try to be nice, it comes back and bites you in the butt. So, so she had to go into assisted living because nobody could be there with her 24/7. She doesn't make enough money to have someone live with her 24/7. And of course, like I said, she was grasping at straws trying to find a good Christian, as she said, who would live with her for free. But it's like, that might have been something down in the country where she lived, where there might have been somebody that didn't have a job or life or whatever. But that was in the 1930s. Nowadays, that's not a way. And if you find someone like that, you probably don't want to invite them into your home. That's all I'm saying. But self-help groups may help victims acknowledge what is happening, recognize that they do not have to put up with maltreatment, and find out how to stop it or get away from it. And I know I attended 2 support groups in the past, survivors of sexual assault and molestation and survivors of abuse. So, they do help. They're helpful. And, it's going to be hard to probably find a group for, elder mistreatment. But certainly you can have them go to a counselor. There are agencies that have counselors. And sometimes assisted living place has counselors that come in and talk. So, that can be a thing depending on what your area is like. Because the needs and human rights of older adults have become an international concern, the United Nations General Assembly in 1991 adopted a set of principles for older persons. So the UN got involved and said, hey, this is becoming a problem. People are living longer and need care. And so, the United Nations, in my opinion, is a good thing. Why would you not want to be part of the United Nations? It's trying to bring the world together in a peaceful, way. So to not want that, to me, is just ignorant and hateful. They cover rights to independence, participation in society, care, and opportunities for self-fulfillment. Because we know with these things, elders have more self-esteem and they feel better about themselves, and they're going to be more happy and involved in their life. So, let's look at the principles for the older persons that the UN has lined out. Independence. Older persons should have access to adequate food, water, shelter, clothing, and health care through the provision of income, family, and community support and self-help. Older persons should have the opportunity to work or to have access to other income-generating opportunities. So, that might be some motivation for a cheap country to not want to have their folks in. If it's outlined that older folks should have some kind of thing coming in, like Social Security. Older persons should be able to participate in determining when and at what pace withdrawal from the labor force takes place. Older persons should have access to appropriate educational and training programs. Older persons should be able to live in environments that are safe and adaptable to personal preferences and changing capacities. Older persons should be able to reside at home for as long as possible. And that's, like I said, other countries have, home health care aides, visiting nurses, or whatever you want to call them. They come all the time. We have, like I said, the elder daycare down the street where you go to work, you take them there, you come pick them up after work, take them home. So, there's ways to make that happen. Care. Older persons should benefit from family and community care and protection in accordance with each society's system of cultural values. Older persons should have access to health care to help them to maintain or regain the optimum level of physical, mental, and emotional well-being, and to prevent or delay the onset of illness. So they outline that there should be some sort of health insurance or health care provided for elders. So a cheap country also might not want that. Older persons should have access to social and legal services to enhance their autonomy, protection, and care. Older persons should be able to utilize appropriate levels of institutional care, providing protection, rehabilitation, and social and mental stimulation in a humane and secure environment. Older persons should be able to enjoy human rights and fundamental freedoms when residing in any shelter, care, or treatment facility, including full respect for their dignity, beliefs, needs, and privacy, and for the right to make decisions about their care and the quality of their lives. And so should everybody. Participation. Older persons should remain integrated in society, participate actively in the formulation and implementation of policies that directly affect their well-being, and share their knowledge and skills with younger generations. Older persons should be able to seek and develop opportunities for service to the community and to serve as volunteers in positions appropriate to their interests and capabilities. Older persons should be able to form movements or associations of older persons. Self-fulfillment. Older persons should be able to pursue opportunities for the full development of their potential. Older persons should have access to the educational, cultural, spiritual, and recreational resources of society. Dignity. Older persons should be able to live in dignity and security and be free of exploitation and physical or mental abuse. Older persons should be treated fairly regardless of age, gender, racial or ethnic background, disability or other status, and be valued independent of their economic contribution. So, good on you, UN. I think those are great principles for taking care of our older folks. Like I say, some countries are not down with that, and that says something about them to me. But, that's just my little humble opinion. So, mistreatment of the elderly can be a problem, but it's not as big a deal. It's not as common a deal as a lot of people think it is. And more often than not, the abuse is mental or emotional or financial. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope this helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.